Good morning, everyone. Good morning, King's Church. It's great to be here, and just to be worshiping God together. It's great to be live streaming. Again, a big shout out to the tech team that you don't see. They're sitting behind the scenes that are doing everything this morning. It's really, really wonderful. Well, we're talking about giving, but we're also in a series, and it's the series of Ruth. And the series is called The Heart of God at the Heart of Community. And this is the third part of our series on Ruth, where we are exploring God's heart, as we said, in the heart of community. Now, 3 weeks ago, Philip started in Ruth 1, good place to start, setting the scene, giving the cultural backdrop, which was excellent, that it was actually a really difficult time in the history of Israel, and specifically, obviously, in the lives of Ruth and Naomi. But you know what? I think we can all kind of feel that we may be in a similar time, in this world, in our country, in our lives, that we are facing difficulties. And yet we are challenged by these two wonderful ladies and a man, because it's really a story of three people, which is interesting. Like Philip said before, there are so many different things that just you see are a shadow of Jesus Christ, in all three of them actually. But we are challenged by their perspective, number one, in suffering, and more importantly, by their response, what they did about it. It's their actions actually that are most challenging to us. And so the second part of the series, Philip again reflected upon loyalty in hard times, how Ruth demonstrated this thing called hesed, love. Hesed is a Hebrew word, hesed, love, and it's a different type of love. It's a covenantal love. It's a commitment to a mother-in-law that went beyond really the calling of love in one sense. And Ruth in Ruth 1:16 stated these famous words, and I have to speak them because these are the words that Liz actually spoke as her vows at our wedding. And they are amazing, amazing words. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." So we now find ourselves in Ruth chapter 2, and this surprisingly coincides with our Giving Sunday, as Philip's already mentioned, the second part of our gift days in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's a good thing, because Ruth really is a chapter that is all about abundant generosity. And so I'd just like to borrow from an article on Ruth by a lady called Sarah Bowler, and she states something very importantly. Our culture often focuses on love as something that you get, rather than on something that you give. And it fixates on how love makes you feel. Isn't that so true? We're so consumed with ourselves. How does love make me feel? Is my wife fulfilling my needs? Are you, as my friend, fulfilling my needs? And yet love in the Bible, hesed love, is all about what do I give? How do I give to the relationship? And so she goes on to talk about hesed love, out of Ruth actually, that it's sacrificial covenant love, and it shows up 3 times in the story of Ruth, demonstrating this hesed love. Firstly, it's shown through our actions. As I said, it's all about doing. Secondly, it's shown through her concern for others. And thirdly, through her strong devotion. So it's actions, concern for others, and her strong devotion to God, to Naomi, and ultimately to Boaz. As the commentator Daniel Block puts it, no one in the book of Ruth demands that God meets their needs. Do you see that? I'll say that again. No one in the book of Ruth demands that God meets their needs or asks for some divine intervention on his or her own behalf. True covenant faith is expressed by the concern for the welfare of others. True hesed faith, true hesed love is concerned and expressed in the concern for the welfare of others. It reminds me of the words of James many thousands of years later in James 2:14-17. It said, "What good is it, brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warm and filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Faith by itself, if it doesn't have works, is dead." And so we see here in Ruth, Ruth is a historical book, but you know what? It's also a powerful parable about love, commitment, and sacrifice. It's all about us demonstrating our love and our faith in God by what we do. It's by our actions. And so in Ruth chapter 2, we see this played out in three ways, or points. You always have to have 3 points to a sermon, right? So in 3 ways, and it points to another. The first way is through gleaning, that is making room for others. The second is noticing the needs of others. And the third is setting aside for others. So making room for others, noticing the needs of others, and setting aside for others. And you know, these all wonderfully point to someone. I have a few people in the congregation. If I had children, I'd be saying, who? Who does it point to? It points to Jesus. It points to our Redeemer. So we're going to go through these 3 points. Liz and I, by the way, we're not socially distancing because we're married. I'd even kiss her on stage, but I'd get into trouble. I was going to mention Jamie at his wedding, but I won't. So we're going to have 3 points, and after each of those 3 points, we're going to show a little video. So let me quickly read Ruth chapter 2, verses 1-4, and then Liz will go through the first point. Now, Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. I was practicing that last night. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Liz?
So our first point, gleaning, making room for others. Why did Ruth even think about going to harvest in the fields and to pick up grain behind the workers who had left it in the field? And why did the workers actually leave that grain behind? Wouldn't their master have wanted every bit of grain picked up so that he could make even more profit than he already was? Well, if we go back to the law in Leviticus 19, 9 and 10, it's actually under a great heading called Holiness and Personal Conduct in my Bible. God told his people, "When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that have fallen on the ground. Leave them for the poor and foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God." So Ruth had actually married an Israelite, so she knew a bit about God's laws. So she knew if she could go and glean in the fields of the Israelites, they would leave some harvest for her, a poor widow and a foreigner. So how can we apply this principle of gleaning in our lives? Well, it's about making space. It's not maxing every penny in our budget or having every minute of our day planned out that nothing can change that. We know the principle of tithing 10% of our income to God, but this is actually something extra. This is leaving space in our lives, in our finances, to be able to give to the poor when something unexpected, like we faced with coronavirus this year. It's about leaving time in your day, that if something extra crops up with a friend, a neighbor, or even as somebody that you don't know, that you've actually got that time of day to give them and help them out. So actually at Compassion, those of you who maybe give through Compassion, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but we've got a blue square on the top right-hand corner of our pages. And in fact, of all our correspondence, there's that one blue square. And this is to remind us that we need to leave space in our times and in our day and in our finances for the poor and the foreigner. So I've actually got a little piece of paper here, and just a good bit of practical advice for you. Maybe you can do after the service, just something so that you've got something to go back on, is to get just a piece of plain paper, fold the corner over, and then open it out again. And then in that corner, just maybe write down somewhere where you can commit to leaving a bit of space in your day and in your finances. Maybe it could be doing something like actually setting up an extra savings fund which you can give into each month to put aside for the poor. It might be spending a bit of time giving of your time to volunteer at a charity. It might be making space purely in your day for 10 minutes just to spend, instead of walking past that homeless person in the street because you're too busy, to actually give them the time of day and some dignity of just going to chat with them. So let's be like Boaz and leave room in our fields, our finances and our lives for those who are in need. We're going to watch a video now. It's a thanks from our friends at Kingston Food Bank, Kingsgate Church and Kingston Vineyard for the money we actually donated to them earlier this year.
Hi, I'm Paul Pickover, run Kingston Food Bank, and since March, together with some other people, I've been running the KT Church's emergency food response. We're actually here standing in one of the buildings that the council has given us to do the food programmes from, an incredible blessing. But I really wanted to say thank you for the gift, the financial gift that you gave to this programme that we're doing. It enabled us between March and July to send 5,000 boxes of food to local families who would otherwise have been struggling at that time, either because they were isolating or literally had lost jobs and just had no way of providing food for their family at that time. Really incredible thing happened though. A few months ago, we, through another initiative called Love Your Neighbour, were able to get match funding for gifts that we were given for food in this borough. And so the money that you gave has actually doubled. It means that everything you gave, as we are spending it, we are getting it given back to us as match funding. So it's an incredible blessing. Not only have we blessed thousands of homes through the food we've been able to give and the other programs we've been running, we've actually been given the money back to spend again. And so we really want to say thank you to God for his provision. He is a God who has unlimited resources, but thank you too for the way that you are partnering with other churches in this borough at this time to make a difference in the lives of local people. Thank you for your gift.
So at the start of lockdown, we started producing food. Many will know about it. It was Meals on Wheels for people who are isolated and vulnerable. At the height, probably in May, about 1,800 meals a week were going out. That led to what's known as the Bright Box Project, where we are putting food recipes and ingredients in boxes and sending them out to families so they can cook a healthy meal together. Just helping families come together and do something that's enjoyable around food. That's distributed through Achieving for Children, which is the social services for children in Richmond and in Kingston. And then as the council and people involved with food in the area were looking at, over the summer, looking at what's going to happen, now, what's going to happen during a second wave, that sort of thing. It was like, what do we put in place? And the Good Food Co-op grew out of that, being how do we supply people with fruit and vegetables particularly, because when people's income collapses, when they end up in emergency food supplies, they often lose out on the healthy stuff. And so how do we enable them to receive that? So what happens with the Good Food Co-op is some people buy a fruit and veg box, the same as the commercial ones that are out there, but every time somebody buys one of those, they're subsidizing somebody else who can't afford it to get a fruit and veg box. So that's the headlines of what's been happening. The gift that you gave us a couple of months ago, what that's enabled us to do is get that project off the ground. You can get grant funding for like this bit of food or for this bit of admin, but to get a project off the ground, you can't get grant funding for it because you can't say this is what it's going to be. And so the money that you guys gave us enabled us to employ a couple of people for a day a week just to put the legwork in, and there's no way that we would be starting that project in 2 weeks' time and starting to deliver boxes to people without the money that you guys gave us. So a massive thank you for that.
Hi guys, it's Noni Farrelly here from Kingston Vineyard and Grow Baby, and I just want to thank you so much for your incredibly kind and generous donation to us. It's allowed us to buy over 1,000 packs of nappies for our families, and although you might think Kingston is a wealthy, green, leafy suburb, we are not. We have families in really difficult circumstances at the moment. They're losing their homes, they're losing their jobs, they've got children, babies, out onto the street, homeless, put into hostels. It's a really difficult time for families, and your generous support has made it possible for us to take care of them. So a big thank you to all of you, and if any of you are looking for some volunteering opportunities, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Once lockdown is over, we're going to need all the help we can get. Thank you again. God bless.
How wonderful. See what happens when we make room for others. It's just gleaning. We just allowed others to glean, and wonderful things happened. The second point is we need to notice the needs of others. And Liz is going to read the part of Ruth 2 now.
We're going to second part, the Ruth chapter 2, verses 5 to 13. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young woman. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants."
Taking notice of others is so critical. And we had an excellent talk on this by Andy McCulloch a few weeks back, so I'm not going to labor the point this morning. But it is critical. And, you know, we see Boaz. You've got to understand the context. He was a wealthy landowner. It was during the most busy time of the year, and the harvest was being reaped. Yet he was there asking on the well-being of a woman that was gleaning. Why should he take concern or take notice of that person? In one sense, she was the lowest of the low, but he took notice of her. And I've just been struck by the need that we need to firstly stop. We can so often be on that treadmill of life, and we need to stop. We need to watch, and we need to listen. I know that I can get so caught up in my life. I can get caught up in work. I can get caught up in my family. I can get even caught up in things of church. And I forget to notice the needs of others. And there is Boaz, a great wealthy landowner, noticing the poorest of the poor. The Bible is very clear that there are a number of categories we should look out for, of types, different types of people. And there are many different verses, but we'll stick with James, as I've already started in James earlier today. So James 1:27 says this: religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this: to visit the orphans and the widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Ruth was a widow. She was a refugee. She was a foreigner, but Boaz noticed her, saw her need, and did something about it. I want to challenge you this morning. Are you noticing people like that in your life? I know we're in lockdown, so it's a bit difficult. But, Liz gave an example earlier. Are you stopping to speak to that person that's selling a big issue on the corner of the street? Are you taking the time to just find people and seek out people in need and just give them the dignity of noticing them? And then, obviously, looking to do something about it. So let's open our ears, let's open our eyes to the needs of others. We know there's need all around us. There's need in this church. There's need in the church. There's need in the city. There is need, in this country. And there is need further afield globally. And we need to open our eyes to that need. And as we're talking about foreigners and refugees, we'd like to show you another video again from our friends in Kenya, just telling us a little bit of what they've done with the money that we gave to them. Thanks, Jamie.
Greetings and much grace from us here in Kenya. To you, our brothers and sisters at the Kings, we really want to thank you very much because of your growing friendship and partnership that really has come in quite handy during a very difficult time. We want to thank you very much because of your giving, generous giving, which has enabled us to be able to touch so many families during a very difficult period in our country. I mean, like we all know, COVID-19 has affected the whole world, but in some countries like in Africa, we find that the whole thing has been complicated because some of the people were caught unawares, others are just struggling from other crises like droughts and others. And so for us in this country, we find ourselves really having to battle with keeping people alive. Some of these vulnerable families and communities really require to be sustained and helped during what has been a very difficult time. So the situation now is more worse because we've just started what's being looked upon as a second wave, which has brought another complication because it's coming in at a time when we were not even through with the first wave. And so any kind of giving that really will come to us will help us in keeping people alive by providing food and relief supplies. Secondly, is just to also continue now that we've got the second wave, is just to help people purchase some of the basic requirements like face masks and things like sanitizers, water points, creating water points in some of the villages and churches, and just encouraging people to keep themselves clean, hygiene, and supplying some of the things that can be able to help in that way. But number three, of course, is just really creation of jobs, creation of making sure that people do not lose hope, because we've now been going through this for a very long time. We're talking about almost 9 months. And sometimes when people go through such a long period of lack and everything else, they can go inward and lose hope. So any funds coming in a small way, we will be able to help people keep their hopes alive. It's a big thank you. And we're looking forward to this friendship and see, because I believe with all my heart, it's not just a friendship that is just about you giving us and us receiving. I sense in my heart that God is in this, and we're looking forward to seeing where this friendship will lead us. Who knows, maybe at the appointed time, some of you will find yourselves in this country, and some of you serving with us in some of these very difficult places. By that time, maybe COVID-19 is gone. But during the COVID period, God was able to knit our hearts with you people. So I want you to hear my heart. And I really want to say to the leadership and the eldership of your church and every one of you members of this great church, a big thank you for arising to the occasion, standing with us, and becoming a blessing when we most needed it. The Lord bless you so much. And we look forward to more communication, and we'll keep you posted on everything that we do with the funds that you will send across. With all our love, it's me from Kenya, Edward, on behalf of thousands of people that look to our leadership as an apostolic base. God bless you. Amen.
God bless you, Edward. So we're to our third point, which is setting aside for others. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to just read 2 verses out of the verses from 14 to 18. And it says there, "And at mealtime Boaz said to her, 'Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine.' So she ate beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over." And then verse 18, "And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied."
So what does it mean to be generous, and how do we be generous? Both Ruth and Boaz have something to teach us about generosity. Boaz actually did more than the law required of him in leaving a margin of grain around his fields for the poor to gather. He actually told his foreman to tell the harvesters to actually pull out some of the grain and drop it so that Ruth could gather that as well. Boaz was not being greedy, as I said before. He could have made a greater profit on his field, but no, he looked after Ruth because he was her kinsman redeemer. On the other hand, Ruth, in her impoverished state, was generous in giving to her mother-in-law the food that she had gathered, and also to sharing some of the food that she'd had at her lunchtime. She gave out of the little that she had. We really need to guard against greed. It's so easy in our world today. It teaches us to be greedy. We're told to, you've worked for that money. It's yours, so you can do what you want with it. The world's telling us to look after number one, that's you. And it doesn't matter who you climb over or neglect, as long as you're okay. It's a bigger TV, a fancier holiday, longer working hours so that you can get these things. I'm not saying these things are wrong, but is having these things causing you to not set aside for others? And even more, are we being sacrificial in our giving? Proverbs 11:24 to 26 in the Amplified Bible says, "The one who generously scatters abroad and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, but it results only in wanton poverty. The generous man is a source of blessing and shall be prosperous and enriched. And he who waters will himself be watered, reaping the generosity he has shown." Patrick and I have actually found ourselves in both of these people's shoes. We've seen ourselves being a Ruth, and we've seen ourselves being a Boaz. So many years ago, when our kids were little, we didn't really have a lot of money. I only worked part-time so that I could spend most of the time with the boys. There were times where I ate just lettuce on a piece of bread from my lunch, just to make sure that the boys had a more nutritious lunch. There were times where we didn't know where our next meal would come from, but only for the generosity of other people did we actually never go without. We were even given a holiday one time, and that was just amazing generosity from people. fact, by the way, it wasn't even a Christian family that gave us that holiday. But through that time, we continued to tithe and to give. And let me tell you, it hurt. It hurt. But you know, we never starved. And I truly believe that God has blessed us for our faithfulness in giving. We often say to each other, we just can't believe where we are now. We are more in a Boaz's position, and we have to be very, very careful that we don't want more. Often when you have a lot, you want more. And it can be easy for us to give. But the challenge to us is, if it's easy, are we actually putting aside enough? Are we actually being greedy? Are we wanting a fancier car or a fancier holiday? So, just a final word. In Deuteronomy 24, which is a similar verse to the Leviticus one I read earlier on gleaning, the Bible tells us to remember that we were once slaves. We need to remember that through Jesus, God has set us free from sin. If we remember that we were once slaves to sin and its desires, then we will be generous. As Timothy Keller says in his book, Generous Justice, when the Spirit enables us to understand what Christ has done for us, the result is a life poured out in deeds of justice and compassion for the poor.
Amen.
We're now going to watch our final video, which is what we're being asked to give into this time, and that is CAP and Christmas lunch on Jesus.
Hi, my name is Isles and I'm the vicar at St John's Church in New Malden. Poverty is a huge problem in the UK. Did you know that in the last quarter of 2019, someone was declared bankrupt or insolvent every 4.5 minutes? And that's pre-COVID. We know that this pandemic is having a devastating impact on the levels of unemployment and financial crisis. Christians Against Poverty are a national debt charity whose vision is to bring freedom and good news to the poor in every community through a nationwide network of CAP projects rooted in local churches. Here in Kingston and New Malden, we offer debt counselling and money management courses to help people across our borough get out of debt. It costs around £15,000 a year for our debt centre to run at present. Now that money goes to staff at CAP head office who negotiate with our clients' creditors and calculate budget plans. It also employs Gail, who is our local debt centre manager, and she meets with our clients and supports them in that process of becoming debt free. At our current capacity, we can take on about 1 new client every week. And we would love to expand this. Basically, we know that the demand for these services is only going to increase over the coming months. So any support you can offer us would help us to do exactly that. So please do give generously. We'd also love you to pray, most of all for those across our borough who are struggling to feed their families or facing eviction. Pray that they might make contact with CAP and find hope and a way forward. Finally, you can get involved if you're interested by becoming a befriender. This is not just a St John's Church project. We seek to connect every client with somebody in a church that is local to them, who can walk alongside them in their journey. You don't need to be a financial expert, you just need to have a desire to show somebody God's love. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to know more, and thank you so much for your support.
For about the last 8 years, another project that we've been involved in is Christmas Lunch on Jesus. And this is packing up Christmas hampers, a full hamper. It has everything that a family needs for Christmas: a turkey, potatoes, sprouts, stuffing, some sparkling drink, non-alcoholic, Christmas pudding, mince pies, you name it. There's about, 16 or 20 items in each box. And we deliver these boxes to local homes. And this year we're aiming to deliver 1,000 hampers to homes across southwest London. So a number of those, hundreds of those are in Kingston, but also in some of our neighbouring boroughs. And if you're looking for opportunities, to give, to act, to pray, to get involved, then this is a project you can get involved in. Money that you give will help fund these hampers. You can be part of delivering a hamper to a family locally just before Christmas. And you can have an opportunity then to pray. You know, we never know what's going to happen when you go to someone's home and you say, you know, Happy Christmas. This is from the local churches. Is there something I can pray for you and your family today? We'd love you as a church to get involved in all the aspects of Christmas lunch on Jesus this year.
Ruth chapter 2, 19 and 20. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers."
Blessed be the man that took notice of you. We have a man that took notice of us. Boaz was a relative of Naomi's and a kinsman redeemer. I'm not going to jump ahead and steal the thunder of other people as they teach later in the series, but suffice to say that Boaz is a shadow of Jesus. He was pointing to Jesus, amen, our ultimate redeemer. Jesus has made room for us. He noticed us in our time of need. He set aside for us to bring us redemption. I just want to end by just reading one more scripture. 2 Corinthians 8 verse 9 says this, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake, he became poor, so that you, by his poverty, might become rich." What a generous God we have. Let's be a generous people. Amen.
Thank you, Patrick and Liz, for serving us so brilliantly. Let me just give you some of the practical details so that you can really engage in this act of worship, which is what it is, as Ross and Emma lead us in sung worship. I'd love us to participate in the worship of giving. There'll be a button which will appear in the chat at any moment now, which you can click on, and that will take you straight to the page you need to use in order to be able to give to our COVID response fund. If you already do give, you may have the details already, and you can do that through your own normal banking if you prefer. Just to be really clear where this money is going, we're going to be giving 25% into a church emergency fund that we can look after you, our own people, if times are hard. The next 25% will go to those last two projects that you heard about, local projects run by churches to feed and to enable those people to have an amazing Christmas lunch on Jesus, and also to be able to fund the work of CAP, which is magnificent work they do to help people in debt counselling, and you can volunteer as well, as you heard. And then the second 50% will go to our friends through the New Frontiers wider family, one of which is Kenya, that you heard from Edward before. The other two are our friends in Zimbabwe and in India. Just so you know where that money is going. Guys, we're about £12,000 short of the £100,000 target we've been aiming at. By my rough maths, if each household that gave last time gives about £250 this time, we will punch through that target. Some of you, that's a big amount of money. For others of you, it's less so. My prayer for you is that in these moments, you will know the grace of God leading you to give cheerfully and generously and allow God to multiply in wonderful, wonderful ways. So let's worship with singing, but let's also worship with abundant, cheerful, generous giving.